have fought for can no longer be sustained. We must fight. Now that's in bold. That's bold, so I said it that way. In the spirit of Dr. Clark, Dr. John Jackson, Dr. Chancellor Williams, and countless others who have joined our ancestors. So here in Los Angeles, we have formed a steering committee of ASCAC to address the issues above. We've already outlined a national plan of action, but before finalizing it, we want to convene a meeting, and they talk about the meeting and when it would be called and where. So it is in part in response to that I would like to add some information and some perspectives of my own, because if we truly understand the nature of the struggle that we are a part of, it's really not a struggle per se about information. It's a struggle per se about unity, about bonding, about the connections of the African family to itself. That has always been the problem. Our existence as a people is what the problem is. The matter of information and the attack on our information about ourselves is a symptom of the old problem that Europeans have of attempting to find a way to destroy the unity in the African community. And so we came into this world evolved as members of families, either little families or big families. Sometimes we call them tribes, sometimes we call them nations. More appropriately, perhaps in the language of today, we should call them ethnic groups. The group of family that has a bond, and the glue or the bond is really the shared cultural heritage, the shared memories of the group. But what I wanted to do was to try to put in perspective this attack that is identified in this letter from our president. Most of the people mentioned in the attack come from a common group of people. In fact, what I would ask you to do if you have a piece of paper, just so that you can keep track of this, and also so that you can accept an assignment that I will suggest after I have finished. I apologize for not having this on a handout or on an overhead, but I think you'll see that it will work okay. I want you to draw a little rectangle at the top of the paper. If you have lined paper, the rectangle should cover about part of 2 lines, because you're going to have some things coming down under this. And in that rectangle, I want you to write the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation. Now, some of you know what the Heritage Foundation is. Founded in 1973, and it was the group that gave Ronald Reagan his blueprint for action. Recently, the Heritage Foundation has published a book that you ought to have, and it is called The Power of Ideas. In that book, they brag that beginning in 1980, they shaped the national agenda at about 80% level. About 80% of the national agenda was shaped by the Heritage Foundation. They told Reagan what his blueprint would be, and a dutiful actor that he was, he read his script. And in reading his script, initiated certain things which include us. I'll get to us in just a moment, because you may wonder, what has the Heritage Foundation got to do with us? You'll see it has a great deal to do with us. The Heritage Foundation, and you should draw some lines at an angle off the top of your box so that you can write the names of some of the people who gave millions of dollars to the Heritage Foundation to do its work. You should, on the first line that you draw, put Coors Beer. Adolf Coors. Adolf. We had another Adolf in history. Coors Beer. Adolf Coors. Leading funder of right-wing causes. got in trouble because of some of the advertisement that Coors Beers was making. They had to back up, and then now they come out with a calendar for Black History Month, but don't be mistaken what the agenda is. Scafee family. You recognize the Scafee family because they're behind the support of Kenneth Starr in the attack on the current president of the United States. So these are people, and we're talking about foundations that have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on their agenda. The Bradley Foundation from Milwaukee, hundreds of millions of dollars to spend, and Coors, Scafee, and Bradley all contribute to heritage. The John Olin Foundation, hundreds of millions of dollars to spend, and it also contributes to the Heritage Foundation. So if you'll put on those top lines Coors, Scafee, S-C-A-I-F-E, Bradley, and Olin. Now I want to tie some of these together with some of the things that were mentioned in the book and with the mission of ASCAC, because whether you know it or not, to my knowledge, there is no group of scholars anywhere in the world currently under attack for writing their history other than the Africans who are working in the United States and in England mainly. Nobody else is under attack for writing their history. And let me say this, everybody who writes their history, no matter who it is, will be under attack. I'm talking about every African who writes their history will be under attack. At one point, one of the strategies was to make it seem that it was a group of rump scholars who didn't know what they were talking about, that were making all these wild claims about the study of ancient Egypt, and that Egyptians were people who were black people. Brother Obadele Williams and I did an article once called "The Struggle to Bring True African History into Being," and that's published as an occasional paper of ASCAC, and in it, the names of those scholars who have always taken this position, going back to Martin Delany, W.E.B. Du Bois, and so forth, the scholars who, with the so-called impeccable credentials, whatever that means, have always argued, if they have studied that question, that the Africans of the Nile Valley were black people. And I also wrote another article called "Bringing Ma'at" for the Journal of African Civilization, because they were floating this notion around on their propaganda machine that it was only a handful of guys who were out here and few women writing this kind of material. And in fact, what we found is the overwhelming opinion of those who have studied this, it was very clear that we were simply in keeping with a long tradition, buttressed by new information, which is even more compelling than our ancestors had when they began to do these things. Now, the Heritage Foundation has had people working for it. Murray worked for the Heritage Foundation, Charles Murray. Okay, in case you don't get it, Charles Murray is the one that wrote several books, one called "Losing Ground," which was a study that intended to frighten white people that they were losing ground to black people as we got more freedom. But the one that we all know is the book, The Bell Curve. So the Bell Curve was funded in part by the Bradley Foundation, who funds the Heritage Foundation, a place where Murray also works. Stick with me now. So you put Murray's name down there, draw a little line between him and the Bradley Foundation and the Heritage Foundation, and also on the right side of your paper, draw a little box for the American Enterprise Institute, which is also funded by some of these same foundations that fund the Heritage Foundation. American Enterprise Institute, and it has some interesting activities, people, and publications to its credit. So Murray is in all three places. He's in the Bradley Foundation, he's in the Heritage Foundation, and he's also at the American Enterprise Institute. And his book